So we had that cultural crisis. And since with that cultural crisis you have this problem, anyone who circumcises women should not be part of us. So in that case, then have your own church, the independent. Huh? And since they are not wanted in schools, have your own schools. One of the things the settlers did was to demand that they be given freedom or no, a role in the governing of this place. My name is Macharia Munene. I'm Professor of History and International Relations at the United States International University in Nairobi. Before that, I was chairman of the department, or the history department at the University of Nairobi. Now, in the 1930s, what do we have? The Great Depression, worldwide. So tight control of the empire. What can be sold or not sold. And people are watching what's going on in Europe. When Benito Mussolini decided to attack Ethiopia in 1945, there was fear that he might end up in Kenya. And some Africans thought that Mussolini was not a bad man if he's going to harass the British. That's why today you might find one or two people being named Mussolini in Kenya after that Mussolini. But in Europe, the Africans, wherever they were, the African elite, became strengthened in Pan-Africanism. That's how Jomo Kenyatta and Haile Selassie became buddies. When Haile Selassie ran away from Addis Ababa to go beg for help and got nothing, the people who received him were other Africans. Now, Kenyatta was in the forefront, identifying with him. The belief was that being Africans, you're on your own. Blacks are their own. It does not matter whether the white country calls itself communist, capitalist, or something else, they're just white. Because none of them came to the assistance of Ethiopia. So blacks, you're on your own. And they ganged up, the sense of Pan-Africanism. Out of that, some people in Jamaica started thinking of Haile Selassie as something special. The Rastafarians came up with that term. It's also at this time that you get intellectual questioning of the essence of colonialism. And Jomo Kenyatta was in the forefront of this. Spirit of Pan-Africanism gets elevated. Kenyatta, who had traveled in Europe, he had been to Moscow, spent some time there at the University of the Toilers, next to the Kremlin. If you go to Moscow, you see this. And he either ran away or he was kicked out. We don't know which is which. But he used to complain about bad food and racism. And these people always talking about petty bourgeois. And so he was complaining, why this petty, why can't you be a big one? In his mind, Kenyatta was always a big bourgeois, not a petty one. You know, you can see the questioning in the mind. He went to Germany, and he saw Adolf Hitler rise up, listened to him a little bit, and he ran away very fast back to England, which he liked. And ended up now with a classmate of some colonial policy makers. Among them, Louis Leakey. And sometimes Louis Leakey and Kenyatta used to forget where they were, and they would insult each other in Kikuyu. And the other people in class looking at these two people wondering what. And they seem to be in competition as to who speaks for the Africans. Liki, who had studied and spoke Kikuyu very well, had been a friend of Chief Koinange, and all those things. If you read the preface to Kenyatta's book, Facing Mount Kenya, sometimes people mistake the book. The book was not about Kikuyu cultural behavior, although it had a lot of it. That was not the point of the book. You can read those things in other places. The book was an attack on the colonial system. And that's why it became an important book. And people who write books have that place where they acknowledge who have helped them. Thank you, Susa, thank you, thank you. And Kenyatta thanked what he called the professional friends of Africa. Professional friends of Africa. These are people who want Africans not to be able to speak for themselves so that they can speak for them. These are missionaries, eh? So they always speak. So what you have here is this demand: Africans should be able to can speak for themselves. So even in the logical, cut out this crap, you know, have a proper African. And that's one of the things Bio Koinange was doing when as he started Githongori teachers. In the logical, there should be an African speaking for Africans, not a missionary. So you can see the combination that, eh? When the big war started, now to be called Second World War, in 1939, KCA was banned, and so were other organizations banned. But the experience this time was different, in the sense that the white powers, the British, the French, the Dutch, needed help from being beaten by a power that was not white, Japan. Japan had swallowed the colonies, beat them up, talking about Asia for Asians, eh? With Japan being the leader of the Asians. Eh? And so they had to mobilize all the resources they could. And the Africans found themselves fighting in Asia, in the Middle East, to save the British Empire from the Japanese or from some other people. Now, the issues that arose in that war were what were the colonial people, colonized people fighting for. If Britain, France, and the West were fighting for their freedom, to preserve liberty, what were people in the colonies fighting for? Mohandas Gandhi in India, who led the resistance to the war, raised a fundamental question to the President of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He said, Britain says it's resisting slavery from the Germans, but Britain enslaves people. In Kenya, he specified Kenya, in other places. And even you Americans, you have the Negro problem with you. So what freedom are you talking about? So those kind of hard questions. Eh? And eventually Britain had to get into an MOU with the Indian nationalists, that they joined the war to help the British. And at the end of the war, they'll get their independence. That's how India got independence. Mm-hmm. It was an MOU thing. Eh? Now, those Africans who went to fight, like Kagia and China, General China, and Madenge, the issues that were being raised, why are you fighting? You cannot say you're fighting for freedom when you're... So there were movements taking places. Questions were, the big powers were talking a lot about freedom for themselves, ignoring that the colonized people also wanted it. So as the war was coming to an end, the anti-colonial movement was rising up everywhere. And there were plans for post-war development. That's how they created the United Nations, as an organ to replace the League of Nations and to deal with issues in future before they blow up. And to ensure that every big power was a member, they created the Security Council with the 5 permanent members who have protection in the name of a veto. Protection against global democracy. That's what we say. So who are they? Britain, US, Soviet Union, and for sentimental reasons, France and China. The Chinese are so many you cannot ignore them. So to ensure that they are there, they must be given protection, the veto power. And that's why they are permanent members. It does not matter what the rest of the world thinks. If one of them says no because it's not in, that's it. It was a protective mechanism. We know the UN has served other purposes, good ones, but that was the intention. So that movement. The colonized world was acting, was moving up. We want the same thing. So as soon as the war was over, you had uprisings in Indochina, where the French were trying to regain their control. You had problems in Malaysia, or Malaya, as it used to be called. You had problems in the Middle East. Palestine was a problem, and they were unable to control. In the planning stages, the blacks, the black elite, were planning to have a post-war conference on the future of colonialism. 2 conferences were being planned. One of them took place. In Washington, D.C., the NAACP was planning something like that. And they were thinking, who can we invite the Africans to discuss future of Africa? The name Jomo Kenyatta was always at the top. Why? Because of his book. And those in Washington were worried that if they don't act quickly, because they knew something was happening in London, that one in London may become more radical than it should be. So 2, which one will take place? The one in Washington did not take place. The one in London the one in England took place. And this is the one organized by George Padmore, with people like Jomo Kenyatta as critical players. They wanted to meet in London, but London was fully occupied by the big guys, because there were so many conferences. In fact, some of the early UN meetings were there. So they went to Manchester, and the mayor welcomed them. He was very happy to have them. Now that is the Manchester Conference, the Pan-African Conference. Kenyatta was in charge of credentials in that meeting. He also represented an illegal organization, KCA, and also spoke for the Eastern African region. These people who are there, first of all, sent their fraternal greetings to all the anti-colonial forces in Malaya, in Indochina, in Algeria. Wherever people are agitating against colonialism, send their greetings. In that meeting, Kenyatta expressed his views on how things should be, or the future. The first thing you do is to grab political power. How you do it is not the issue. But grab what? Yes. Because with political powers, you can do what you want. That was his message there. At the end, the delegates agreed that they would do everything and anything to destroy colonialism and imperialism, even if it destroys the world. That's what they said. So the fear that had been expressed in Washington was being seen in the resolutions. W.E.B. Dubois found a ticket to go to London through the military. They gave him a lift. So he was there to represent a transition. It was the first Pan-African Congress in which continental Africans appeared to be more than the diaspora Africans. And so the radicalism. After that, they wrote petitions to the new organ, the United Nations, saying whatever it is. Kenyatta signed those things with Dubois and all things. The people in the Gold Coast noticed the young man Francis Kwame Nkurumah. So they invited him. He went and implemented some of those things. Mass mobilization, strikes, and everything. And the Gold Coast became the first colony to get self-internal government. And he was elected when he was in jail. And so there was fear of Gold Coastism spreading across Africa. But there was no fear in Kenya. Why? There are a lot of white people here. There are no white people in West Africa. The white people here are comfortable, they are entrenched, and the natives love them. Okay? So there is no fear of something similar happening here. And it was so safe that some people even started thinking of maybe you can place a few missiles here to deal with the Russians, and if they retaliate, they will hit here. They will not, assuming the Russians are stupid, but they won't know who did it. But you can see the sort of thinking, the feeling of comfort of the white man's country, which is captured in some of the books of the settlers and the children of the settlers, and how they had a good time. All Africans were boys. And you see a white man, you have to show you to a coffee, otherwise you get slapped. And you don't speak English to the Mzungu because that's a Mzungu language. So they speak to you in some pidgin something, yeah? That's supposed to show you a level. So there was, then the white people who came back were given more land, more resources. The Africans who came back were not given those things. Instead, they were deprived. They felt cheated. And so you have this undercurrent. Now, during the war, Mbioko Inange had expected to be appointed in the Legico because he had been agitating for it. He was not. So the governor decided to look for an African who is good. And they found Eliud Madu. Now the elite, those who had been to Alliance, Maseno, and all those other places, formed a group, the Kenya African Study Union. They were going to study issues and feed Madu with information so that he can debate properly on African issues in the Legico. And he was a very good debater, talking about education, about drinks, and the right of an African to stand another one a beer. But he did good. They were very happy. He did good. After a while, they got tired of studying. So they changed, dropped the S, and it became Kenya African Union. So the S dropped. And as the war came to an end, it was now Kenya African Union that was operating as an elite party. Kenyatta returned after his experience in Europe in 1946. And he was a showman. Kenyatta was always acting. You know, he appeared in a movie, Rivers of the Sanders, Sanders of the River, where he was playing some African chief, together with Paul Robeson, his friend. He used to be very angry with white people who expected him to sing like Paul Robeson, and he couldn't. So this man shows up in Mombasa, and the first thing he does is to kiss the ground. So which excites people, eh? And well received, lines up for people. And so he comes to Nairobi, he's received by his comrades, the old people, the KCA people, and Bioko Inange and others. He was trying to survey the environment. He tried to get in touch with the government, the colonial system. I think they were of the opinion he should go to the local natives council, Kiambu, but anyway. Somehow he is advised to get to Kau, so he and his friend James Gishoro, who was the chairman of the time, so Gishoro steps down and he becomes Kau chairman. And as Kau chairman, he did 2 or 3 things. He energized Kau as a party, because before that it was seen as a what? An elite thing. Once he came in, he turned it around into a mass movement, very carefully. The other thing he did was to advise the members to maintain international contacts, because he himself had contacts. So you find that some of the Kau documents are in Washington, D.C. because the friends, the people he knew, tell them, keep them informed of what you are doing. You do not know when you are going to need them. They'll come to you. Just the same way that Harry Dhuku was in touch with the Gavi and all those things. You don't know when you're there, so Kenyatta advised that, and that was done, which would explain why there was that international response when he was arrested, he was captured, because they said, no, this is nonsense. So he did that. And the other thing was to convince his old comrades in KCA to be part of this new movement, Kau, which was pan-Kenyan, because you had all people from everywhere there. And he went around recruiting people into Kau. One of the most important people he recruited was one Luo businessman who believed that you can become free by having a lot of money, named Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. So he told him, my friend, you are doing it wrongly. Remember his statement in Manchester? Politics first. The others you can handle, eh? So if you read Odinga's book, Not Yet Uhuru, he makes it clear that he became Kenyatta's disciple in politics. There were other people, Chengo Neko, of course, with his publications, Ramogi, a very staunch supporter. So that is now at the top level. And from what we have since found out in some of our discussions with people, he maintained his close connections with particularly Jesse Kariuki, the KCA man. And of course, got married into the Koinange family. And the Koinange family were also doing something. So he became an in-law to Mbio Koinange. They were teaching at Githongori together in those days. It is in that context, from what we have been finding out, that Kenyatta encouraged, if not authorized, the recruitment of people who can take up arms. So we are told that he sent for Madenge, Stanley Madenge, Mirugi. He knew about him and his experience. He sent for Dedan Kimathi, who was very efficient in organizing cow people. And he sent for other people. I'm sure he sent for General China, or we knew about him. So what they discussed in those things is another matter. And you have then the other people, the one who ended up in Kiburi House, the Muhimu, who are also part of the whole thing. So within Kau, you have factions growing up, and one of them becoming more and more radicalized, and but getting policy direction from up there, and through the person of Jesse Kariuki, recruiting people, potential fighters, who eventually will become now what would call Mau Mau. Now, it is in that context then you start hearing of people taking oaths as of 1947, if not 46. The records are there, some DC complaining somewhere, something about Mau Mau. So 47, 48, there are small records in the districts, in the DCs handing over reports, or reports of this and this. So they are there. Apart from oath-taking, you hear people beginning to identify potential enemies. That so-and-so is not tuning in, is not with us. And if you are seen to be too close to the white man, then you are seen to be an enemy, because the message had been passed. The enemy is the Mzungu, the settler in this place, which would explain why they tried to kill a councillor in Nairobi, Mushohi Gekonyo. They shot at him. Why? Because he's the one who signed for, on behalf of Africans, for Nairobi to be given a charter as a city. They said, now, what are you doing? He was saved, he didn't die in that. So what you have is that there is growing tension in the country among the Africans. And at the same time, there is this sense of false calmness in the white man's country. So this place was a playground. Kiano calls it what, a Shangri-La. Shangri-La is the polite way of saying brothel, large brothel. The one talked about in the Happy Valley and all those kind of things. So what you are saying, we have two environments developing in the same place. One of agitation and anger among the Africans, and the other one of relaxing among the white people. Let me try to finish by noting something that Richard Leakey wrote in one of his books. You know Richard Leakey? He used to be the chief bureaucrat in Moi's time. He was in high school, and I think he was in Duke of York at the time. So when the King of England died, King George, he noticed that there was something wrong. that while white boys and girls, the white people were crying because the king was dead, the Africans didn't care, did not show any sign of sadness. And so he was wondering why. Yeah? Because if you are all the same subjects, how come these people are not sad? Yeah? Because the king has died. And so there were those kind of little signs here and there, which showed that. Then you had a governor, Philip Mitchell, whose term was coming to an end, and he did not want to be seen as if he's presiding over chaos. So he tried to ignore what was going on. And so when he eventually left, he is the one who reportedly advised, I think he's the one who advised Kenyatta to go to Kau. And if you want to help, let's work over there. And Gishuru was supposed to be there. So Gishuru stepped down for him to take over Kau. Another person of note was Kenyatta's classmate, Louis Leakey, who had now become a major government operator in the areas of intelligence. So if you wanted something done, you check with Leakey. So Henry Moria, when he was planning to start his publication, Momanyarari, and he went to the right government offices, he was told, go and check with who? Leakey. If Leakey gives you permission, you do it. If she says no, it's no. So Leakey was some kind of clearing house for African things. So Moria's newspaper, Momanyarari, was cleared by Leakey with advice not to antagonize the government.